The world died in the white, a frozen silence that swallowed cities whole, but for tracker Maeve, survival is just instinct. Her life shatters when the secretive, elite Erick emerges from the deep ice, leading a desperate column of 111 people on a massive trek to a hidden industrial site called Penn Valley. He needs her guidance, she needs his resources. But as their forced alliance battles predators, blizzards, and a hostile barbarian tribe that controls their route, Maeve realizes Erick is hiding a terrible truth about the past and his purpose. Their distrust is absolute in the freezing day, yet by night, their shared tent is a place of passionate, necessary release. Chapter 1. A wave of relief crashes over me the moment I spot the large, looming gray structure through the haze of falling snow. The site of Mall City, its concrete body ghostly in the dim light, makes my frozen limbs feel just a little lighter. My lungs ache with every breath, the cold air cutting deep like shards of glass. But I'm almost there. Almost home. Every inch of me is numb as I push through the final mile, my muscles trembling with exhaustion. My clothes are stiff with ice. It's been 3 brutal months away, scavenging in the deadlands, hacking through snowbanks and rusted wrecks to find just enough scrap to get me through the upcoming freeze. Not that it matters much. Between summer and winter, the difference is negligible, just varying degrees of hell. What we call summer here is simply a cruel joke. During those months, the sun shows itself through the clouds once or twice a day, just enough to tease you. But in winter, the sky remains sealed shut. No sun, no warmth. Just gray. I reach the outer gate and bang on the heavy black metal with the side of my gloved fist. My feet threaten to give out beneath me. Then, through the frost-rimmed glass of the reinforced viewer, a familiar face appears. The sight warms me more than any heater ever could. The door groans as it swings open, one half of a massive gate that guards the entrance to Mall City. Warmth rushes out like breath from a dragon's mouth. Strong, familiar arms wrap around me. 2 weeks late. You trying to kill me with worry? Tyler says, voice muffled against my icy hood. I lean into him for a second longer than I probably should. Nice to see you too, I mutter. Tyler's face is partially hidden under the fur-lined hood of his red parka, which marks him as one of the city guards. The color is a warning and a badge of responsibility. I smirk as we walk through the entrance. My sled, tied to my waist with fraying rope, drags noisily behind me, half buried in ice and piled with what little I've managed to collect. The gate closes behind us with a shuddering clang, sealing out the frozen world. The sound, the sudden stillness, nearly drops me to my knees. For the first time in months, I'm surrounded by warmth, by light, by people. I'm not that easy to kill, I say dryly, waving to the other guards clustered at the station. Tyler chuckles and falls in behind me, his boots thudding against the concrete floor. Then he makes a sharp tisking sound. Please tell me you got jumped. That this isn't all you found. I glance back at my pathetic haul and grimace. I wish. It's getting harder to find viable scrap. The old cities are picked clean, and the outer zones, what's left of them, are either buried or cursed. Next season, I'll have to venture farther out, beyond the mapped routes, into places no one returns from. Being unsanctioned, unauthorized, unpartnered, means the work is twice as difficult, twice as dangerous, and pays half as much. You know I'd never let you starve, Maeve, Tyler says, looking at me with those eyes, gray like a storm over ice. I know, I say softly. We walk deeper into Mall City. 4 levels of repurposed shopping mall turned stronghold. Home to over 2,000 people. After months alone in the wasteland, being surrounded by this many bodies is overwhelming. But there's comfort in it too. A strange, jarring kind of comfort. We head toward the scary shop, the tongue-in-cheek name for Thomas's scrap exchange, when I decide to shift the mood. Aren't you abandoning your post a little too casually? Tyler smirks. Who said I was on duty? Mischief dipped in steel. That's the boyish grin I remember best from childhood. But it disappears in a blink when his eyes catch on a group of women moving through the narrow corridor that serves as Mall City's market. Long gray skirts swish around their legs as they stop to speak with various residents. One of them is Aisha Carrick, wife of Robert Carrick, our so-called leader. The market is lit with a mix of solar-powered floodlights and strings of scavenged LED bulbs, their artificial glow supplementing the faint natural light that seeps through the giant glass ceiling far above. It gives everything a surreal, dreamlike tint. Anything new while I was gone? I ask, letting myself relax just a little. The warmth is starting to seep into my bones. My cheeks tingle as sensation returns. Tyler checks to make sure no one is close enough to overhear. Then he leans in and mutters, "We received some guests." I lift an eyebrow as I peel off my top coat and fold it over my arm. Mall City is always kept at a consistent internal temperature, chilly but bearable. 1 or 2 layers are usually enough. It's practically tropical compared to the outside. New arrivals? I ask, half sarcastic. Did you roll out the red carpet? We hardly get anyone new, he replies. And this group, Erick says they can't stay. That surprises me. He's turning people away now? There are rumors, Tyler says with a shrug. Big changes coming. And it's not just the number, it's who they are. I stop walking. How many? 88, he whispers. My brain struggles to process that number. 88? I say too loudly. A few heads turn. Tyler winces and shushes me. Remember those stories we used to tell? About the bunkers? Of course I do. Yeah. I nod slowly. These are bunker people. My stomach twists. The mythos of the bunker elite, rich, powerful survivors who locked themselves underground while the rest of the world froze, has always filled me with quiet rage. They were the ghosts of a gilded age, the villains of every bedtime tale. They can go back to their luxury tombs, I snap. What the hell do they want with us? To drain what little we have left. Tyler's expression darkens. They weren't in good shape. You should have seen them. Half dead. Starved. There are kids. I cross my arms but say nothing. Tyler has always been the bleeding heart. Always trying to fix things. It's why he's so determined to save Anna. A girl we grew up with in Red Row, who now sells herself to survive. Not that I judge. If my haul doesn't stretch, I might be next in line to join her. I need to get this to Thomas, I say abruptly. Hot food and a hotter shower. In that order. Tyler hesitates, then speaks in a lower voice. Erick wants to see you. That stops me cold. What? Just go. He asked for you specifically, he says, already turning back toward his post at the gate. I drag my sled toward the scary shop, anxiety gnawing at my chest. Hopefully Thomas won't lowball me, though knowing him, that's exactly what he'll do. Later, with my trade complete and a small pile of tokens in my pocket, I finally collapse into my small apartment. I devour a bowl of hot noodle stew like it's the last meal I'll ever eat. The savory broth, the silky egg yolk, it's pure bliss. I close my eyes and feel the warmth trail all the way down to my stomach. For a moment, just one, I tell myself I'll never go back out there again. Then comes the knock. I sigh, annoyed. 2 hours. That's all I got. The credits from my scrap won't last me the year. 3 months, max. The egg was a stupid indulgence. I should have saved the tokens. But gods, I needed that comfort. My long black hair is still damp from my first real wash in weeks as I pad barefoot to the door and yank it open. Gordon stands there, Erick's assistant. His eyes drag slowly from my bare feet to the loose fabric of my pants and then linger entirely too long at chest level. My tank top is thin. I know what he's seeing. I don't flinch. Gordon's been a customer in Red Alley. Regular, even. His father's on the council. He always pays. Yes? I ask. Voice flat. Erick requests your presence, he says, his eyes still not rising. I resist the urge to fold my arms over my chest. No need to be shy now. I might need him soon. Now? I just got back. Finally, he looks at my face and shrugs with a smirk. If it were up to me, I'd give you time to rest. I sigh, knowing there's no point arguing. Nothing good ever comes from a meeting with Erick. The last time I spoke to him was when he denied my request to join the Rangers. I'll be out in a minute, I say, retreating into my apartment. I cover my half-eaten food with a sigh, the warmth in my belly already giving way to the familiar churn of dread. That looks sharp. Chapter 2. The Price of Survival. When we reach Erick's office, Gordon knocks twice and then gestures for me to enter before an answer comes. Erick stands in front of a towering window that looks out over the snow-covered wasteland, his silhouette rigid and solemn. He doesn't turn immediately, but when he does, his eyes sweep over me in a way that is far from welcoming. Unlike Gordon's measured scrutiny, Erick's gaze is clinical, cold, detached. I shiver, as though ice snakes its way down my spine. His gray eyes, always slightly tinged with disdain when directed at me, bore into me with their usual quiet repulsion. I know he sees me as the inevitable rot of his city. If I hadn't seen him at public events, smiling, charming, the epitome of decorum, I might have thought it impossible that such a man could hold power in Mall City. But politics is a strange and monstrous beast. His gaze flicks toward the chair opposite his desk as he takes his seat, and I move quickly to obey the unspoken order. Those eyes unsettle me, though I've only seen their identical shade on his children and, no, I must not finish that thought. That path spirals toward madness, and I need to keep my wits about me. Silence stretches between us, tense and unyielding. The only sound is the soft ticking of the old brass clock on the wall, like a countdown to something inevitable. I meet his stare and hold it. A stubborn, necessary part of me refuses to speak first. I have an assignment for you, he says finally. My heart jumps, traitorous and foolish. For a brief moment, I'd hoped he'd stay silent, that Gordon would eventually interrupt and usher me out. What sort? I manage, my voice strained. I'm sure you've heard about the group, the 88, who recently joined us. They're merely passing through Mall City, but they require a guide to see them off our land. And you want me to guide them? I finish, a bite in my tone I don't bother hiding. Erick's mouth twitches in irritation, but he nods. Yes, he replies tightly, locking eyes with me. I'm curious, Commissioner, why me? I ask, letting the question hang heavy in the sterile air. According to your own words, there are rangers who are more mentally and physically fit for such a task. His face blanches for the briefest of moments before he recovers, reclining in his chair with an oily smile. Because, Maeve, I want you, and every other miscreant from Level 1, gone from Mall City. He taps a manicured finger on the desk. You can leave now, adequately outfitted with the 88, or be thrown out at the end of winter when the Daughters of Light conduct their cleansing. His words hit like a slap. My stomach drops, the remnants of the warm stew turning to ice. There's been talk, rumors whispered in the alleys and stairwells, that Level 1 needs to be cleansed. Erick's pious wife and her Daughters of Light have been the loudest voices calling for the removal of the whores, bastards, and slackers that make up much of our level. If only she knew her righteous husband used to be a regular in Red Alley back in his younger days. You can't do that, I whisper, my voice shaking. Where do you expect us to go? The Deadlands? Erick doesn't answer. Instead, a sharp knock at the door breaks the moment, and Gordon ushers in two strangers. I tense immediately. I know every face in Mall City. These aren't ours. They are the bunker elite. Erick's demeanor shifts immediately, like a man slipping into a well-worn mask. He stands to greet them, his tone suddenly warm and falsely enthusiastic. The man is tall, broad-shouldered with sharp features and piercing blue eyes. His blonde hair is neatly trimmed, his posture military. He has the calm menace of someone who's led others through hell and survived. He looks to be in his late 30s. The woman beside him, similar in appearance, has softer features but stands with equal, rigid confidence. Siblings, perhaps. I forget my anger for a moment as I watch Erick, charming, confident Erick, visibly falter in the face of this man. It irks him, I can tell. He straightens his spine a little too much, forces his expression to remain pleasant. I rise to my feet when Erick says, Ah, Erick, Shanna, just in time. This is Maeve, our best ranger and your guide. I nearly choke on a bitter laugh. Erick, the bastard, always knows how to perform. Erick and Shanna size me up, and I suddenly feel every inch of my 5'3" frame. They tower over me, used to the sheltered space of their underground world. You'll be our guide? Erick asks, directing the question to me, not Erick. I glance at Erick, who looks faintly anxious. Temptation creeps in, to say no, just to watch him squirm and lose face. But his threat still hangs heavy over my head. Yes, I reply. It looks like I will. The tight line around Shanna's mouth loosens slightly, a flicker of approval that I immediately distrust. See? Erick says brightly, clapping his hands together. Told you it would all work out. I don't know where I'm taking them, though, I add bluntly, meeting Erick's glare. You didn't brief her? Shanna's disapproval is sharp, cutting through Erick's forced cheer. I was just about to. Erick strides to a smaller table, where a detailed, surprisingly large map is laid out. We gather around. I've seen maps before, dusty and outdated ones from textbooks in the library, but never one so crisp and current. Erick points. We're here. Phoenix, Arizona. He drags his finger west and up. You'll be guiding them to Penn Valley, California. I blink, processing the sheer scale of the journey. How far is that? About 810 miles, Erick answers, his voice flat. I stare at him, jaw slack. I've never gone more than 40 miles from Mall City. 800 miles? In the dead of winter? The distance is a death sentence. I don't know if... Of course you do. You're smart and resilient, Erick cuts in, a chilling mix of flattery and coercion. She doesn't seem so sure, Shanna says coldly. Erick smiles that politician smile again. If Maeve can't do it, no one can. She's only daunted by the distance, not the task itself. Damn him, he's cornered me. Even to me, his logic is sound. I hope you're not trying to shortchange us, Erick, Shanna warns. We had a deal. My spine stiffens. She's doubting my ability as a ranger. Fear not, madam. I'm the best ranger this city has, I say, chin high, injecting a sharp confidence into my voice. Shanna scowls. Erick's lips twitch. Amusement, maybe. It hardly matters now, he says, eyes locked on me. Erick's already forced our hand. Erick bristles. We agreed. I provide supplies, a guide, and 22 volunteers to join your group. Erick's face darkens. Volunteers? You mean the 22 you foisted on us? Your level 1 rejects. They'll be a resource, Erick replies smoothly. They've lived above ground all their lives. That experience is invaluable. I snort. Valuable resource? Erick echoes me with scorn. I picture the whores of Red Alley and the slackers who can barely lift a crate and wonder just what value they're supposed to offer, aside from body heat and bartering favors. Erick lounges behind his desk, fingers laced smugly over his belly. Erick grits his teeth, What exactly did we give you in return for this generosity? We gave him our bunker's location, Shanna replies quietly, her eyes burning with resentment, which I'm sure is now stripped bare. A bunker that can house 88 people must have been a treasure trove. No wonder Carrick's smug. He got a death trip off his hands and plundered a resource cache in one stroke. I see, I murmur, the pieces clicking into place. Do you? Shanna growls. We got swindled. Later, I follow them to their temporary quarters. The large open hall has pallets lined along the walls. Children, 6 of them, no older than 5, play quietly in a corner. The sight of them, bundled up but looking pale and unnaturally quiet, is a gut punch. You have children? I ask, unable to hide my shock. Is that going to be a problem? Erick asks, defensive. Yes, I admit, the professionalism momentarily breaking. How the hell are we going to carry toddlers through the snow for 800 miles? They'll freeze before we clear the first mountain pass. We've made provisions, he says dismissively. We just need a guide. Being a guide means ensuring you all make it, I snap. I understand, Mrs.? I don't answer. We've engineered something for the kids' safety, he continues, gesturing toward the back doors. I'd like to see it. Of course, Shanna steps in. I'm heading to storage. Could you review our inventory and advise on what we may or may not need? I nod. As I walk to the double doors, they open to reveal a line of specialized sleds being wheeled in. 2 of them are enclosed, bullet-shaped with small windows. Others are open-topped and familiar, modified ranger sleds, now with added wheels. I circle them, inspecting their design. The wheels won't work in deep snow, I say, turning, and nearly bumping into Erick. Problem? He asks. Another man steps up, smiling easily. Dr. Kyle Martinez. Call me Kyle. I nod. Maeve Frost. I give him a tired, dry smile. The wheels are for packed ice and flat surfaces, not powder, Kyle explains patiently. We'll lift or tow them with harnesses when we hit deep snow, like the mountains. I nod, grudgingly impressed by the foresight. Erick opens an enclosed sled's door. It's insulated and padded, designed to keep the children warm and shielded from the wind. There's enough room, and even a small, efficient heating element. You made this? I ask Kyle. Built it myself, he says proudly. You're a strange doctor, I reply. Strange? He laughs. I've never seen a doctor who builds. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm an engineer. Erick's an environmental scientist. Shanna's the one who heals the body. I stare. So you're called doctors, but you don't heal? They look at each other, used to this confusion. It's an academic title, Maeve, Erick explains. A designation of knowledge from before the freeze. You bunker people are strange, I mutter, the title making them seem even more alien and aloof. Shanna returns with an itemized list. We go over it together. She's calmer now, her sharp intellect focused on the logistics. I nod in agreement with her updates on medical supplies and caloric estimates. Don't unpack, she says, her tone clipped and professional. We leave in 40 hours. I flinch. Erick offers a sympathetic smile, the first hint of genuine human kindness I've seen from the group. We're still waiting on the names of Carrick's 22, he says. But you should gather your personal things. The next few hours will be busy with final checks. I'll be back in 10, I reply, suddenly taking charge. The fear of the distance hasn't gone, but the certainty of my role has settled. There are rules you all need to know before we go out into the white. We need to talk about rations, watches, and how we handle the dead zones. And the first rule is, I decide the route, not the map. Chapter 3. The Cost of Exile and a New Command. When I got back to my room, I quickly reheated my noodle stew, but the satisfaction I felt earlier was long gone. My mind was a tight spring, constantly circling the same grim thought. I have to leave this place. For good. The 810 miles stretched before me, and every warm degree inside Mall City now felt like a taunt. Fortunately, utter exhaustion won. Sleep claimed me the moment my head hit the pillow. The next thing I knew, a loud, urgent knock rattled the thin metal frame of my door, dragging me back from the void. Dragging myself out of bed, I stumbled toward the sound. When I opened it, I was instantly enveloped by Ellen Tyler's mother, in a fierce, rosemary-scented hug. The familiar, maternal scent soothed something deep inside, a grounding comfort I hadn't realized I was craving. I was so worried about you, Maeve, she said, her hands cupping my face, brushing a stray curl of black hair out of my eyes. I noticed the new worry lines etched around her mouth, lines that weren't there when I left months ago. Then my gaze shifted to the figure standing behind her. Erick. He looked just as tall and out of place in the narrow level 1 corridor as he did in Carrick's office. His sharp blue eyes scanned the hallway with an efficient, military vigilance. I was starting to get worried. It's been 11 hours, he said, his voice a low, disciplined murmur. He wasn't criticizing my rest. He was stating a logistical error. Oh, shoot! I checked the digital clock. 11 hours gone. I had no idea how exhausted I was. Let me put on my shoes. You still look tired, dear, Ellen said, already stepping past me. Just tell me what you need and I'll help you pack. Before I could protest, both she and Erick were inside. The space, already modest, felt impossibly smaller now. I was suddenly hyper-aware of the state of the room, and the proximity of this man whose presence radiated a quiet, unsettling heat. Thanks, Elle. But I think I can manage, I said from behind the curtain as I pulled on my socks and heavy boots. Then the terrifying realization hit me. Did Tyler tell you what Carrick has me doing? For the first time, I said the truth out loud. I had to leave. No coming back. No home. Ellen made a disgusted noise, a low hum of pure contempt. Yes, that worm wants us out. Damn him. I froze mid-sock. Us? My voice was tentative, but my heart was pounding. I yanked back the curtain. You're not the only one being cast out, Ellen said, smoothing her cardigan. Carrick and his precious wife want me gone too. Tyler and I will be coming with you. A spike of relief and shock hit me. They were safe from the cleansing, but exiled to the white. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but Ellen cut me off. Story for another time. I'll get everything you need from the storeroom. You and this fine gentleman here, she nodded toward Erick, have other more pressing things to settle. I rattled off a quick list, but when I started naming food supplies, Erick interrupted. We'll handle the food. Just focus on what you'll need to stay comfortable during the journey. I almost scoffed. There's no comfort to be found in the white, I said, glancing out the window. Ellen kissed my cheek and left. The door shut with a soft click, and the silence that followed was dense, intimate, and entirely too warm. I could feel the low thrum of his presence, and the irrational flicker of attraction returned. A brief, dangerous lapse of professional focus. He cleared his throat. Everyone's gathered at the hall, waiting for you. I grabbed my coat. He followed. We walked down the corridor, the silence thick until he finally spoke. Fascinating place you've built here. I latched onto the topic. I'm sure it's nothing compared to your bunker. The bunker wasn't meant for long-term habitation. How long was it supposed to last? 50 years. The answer was clipped. I raised an eyebrow. So you were born in a bunker 50 years past its expiration date? He hesitated, a shadow crossing his sharp features. You could say that. Finding a thriving community gives me hope. I just wonder how the heat and lights have stayed on. I explained the oil mine and the social hierarchy of Mall City. So society hasn't changed, he muttered, his eyes on me now, full of a strange contemplative sadness. He wasn't judging the hierarchy. He seemed disappointed in the predictability of human nature. You always this cryptic? I asked, a slight smile playing on my lips. He returned it, a flash of genuine charm that was immediately unsettling. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping. And you? I'd hate to tear lovers apart. I met his gaze head on. No, it gets cold out there in the snow, Erick. I'm just lining up my options. The lie felt sharp and necessary. He laughed softly, the sound a low, intimate rumble. Noted. I pushed open the door and stepped into the assembly hall. We leave in 20 hours. The hall was controlled chaos. I spotted Tyler next to my sled, his red parka, a beacon of loyalty. Tyler, I stepped close, lowering my voice. You didn't have to do this. He finally stood up, his stormy gray eyes meeting mine. He was going to transfer me to level 4, Maeve. I wasn't going to let you go alone. Red row until the end. He gripped my shoulder, the gesture a silent, unbreakable promise. Then the side doors opened. Shanna entered with 2 men, one of them her husband Dave, pushing a single, heavy-duty dolly piled with food crates. The hall went silent. I scanned the empty doorway. Where were the others? Is this it? A woman clutching a child cried. Shanna's face tightened, not a smile, a wince. Yes, she said, her voice strained. This is all we were given. The voices rose like wind over ice. Angry. Afraid. I counted the crates, 5 of them. Enough to feed 2 people for maybe 6 days, if we were lucky. Shanna stepped back, her expression cracking. We did what we could. Carrick cut off the storeroom access last night. The murmurs swelled into shouting. We paid for supplies. This isn't enough to last a week. I looked to Erick. His jaw was tight, eyes scanning the room. Not panicked, just calculating the instability. He saw me watching him, and for a brief, electric moment, our eyes locked. There was an unspoken understanding. Betrayal confirmed, survival mode activated. That's when I stepped forward. Everyone, shut up. I shouted. The words rang out, hard and sharp, cutting through the noise. Yes. The food isn't enough. Yes. We've been screwed, I said, making sure to look at every desperate face. But screaming about it won't make more appear. It will, however, waste the strength you'll need to survive what's coming. I looked directly at the crates. This food is not for 2 people. It is for the children and the infirm. Everyone else will be put on minimal reserve rations immediately, and will rely on what we can find, hunt, or scavenge. A man near the front scoffed. And what happens when the snow takes the game? When we're out there freezing and starving with nothing left? I looked him dead in the eye. Then we keep walking. And we don't stop until we find something better. Or we die trying. That's what this is now. Erick stepped up beside me. The proximity was deliberate. A public show of support. We've survived worse, he said, his voice quieter but commanding. We'll do it again. Together. I turned to him, making our new dynamic clear for the whole group. The rules have changed. I am the guide. That means from this moment on, you will take orders from me. No committee, no academic debate. I decide the route, the pace, and the risks. Erick stared at me, his eyes searching mine. He saw the cold, brutal decisiveness of a pure survivor. The moment stretched, and I felt the heat of his approval, an acknowledgement of my necessary ruthlessness. He nodded, a single, sharp motion. Understood, Maeve. The command is yours. The hall's panic subsided, replaced by a tense, focused energy. I had given them truth and a direction. I walked over to my sled. Tyler was there, securing a new strap. I checked every buckle. The weight of the sled felt personal. Pieces of 112 lives we were being forced to carry into the unknown. Erick approached me again as I finished securing the tarp. You handled them well, he said. I yelled. That's not leadership. That's desperation. He nodded. Sometimes it's the same thing. You really think we'll make it? Yes, I said, not even sure who I wanted an answer from. Him, myself, the universe. Why? He turned toward me, his expression unreadable, his proximity a silent, potent distraction. Because we have no choice, and because I trust you to find us the best odds. The rest of the day was a blur of instruction. Thermal tents, dry fuel, edible lichen. By nightfall, there was nothing left to prepare. 20 hours had passed. As we lined up at the massive gates, I glanced back one last time at Mall City. The lights burned soft through the falling snow. The city had closed its eyes. Now the white waited. This sets up a very strong Chapter 4, where the expedition began. Chapter 4, 8 hours in. The massive gate of Mall City groaned open, a drawn-out, reluctant sound that seemed to mourn our departure. No triumphant fanfare, just the metallic shriek of abandonment. It was still dark. The rising sun was nothing more than a faint, gray stain bleeding into the perpetual twilight of the frozen sky. The air hit us immediately, a physical blow that made lungs seize and exposed skin ache. Inside Mall City, the temperature was regulated. Outside, it was just the white. I stood at the head of the column, my own sled rope looped over my shoulder. Behind me, the 112 souls of our new community were arranged into 4 groups, each pulling 5 modified ranger sleds. The children were bundled into the 2 specially insulated carriers, the only luxury we possessed. Tyler was directly behind me, his red parka the most vibrant color in a field of gray and brown wool. He was paired with Shanna, an intentional choice, my loyalty paired with her organizational genius. Erick was near the center, managing the pace of the main body, his tall frame a beacon of quiet order. I waited until the last sled had cleared the perimeter, and the gate slammed shut with a deafening, final clang. The sound echoed the door closing on our old lives. Ready, Maeve? Tyler's breath plumed white around his face. Ready, I confirmed, pulling the rope tight. I started walking. Slowly at first, allowing the cold, heavy realization of the 810 miles to settle on every shoulder. The first few hours were purely psychological. The snow was packed and icy near the old city limits, allowing the sled runners and small wheels to glide smoothly. The initial pace was strong, everyone driven by the fear of being left behind and the memory of that single, pathetic pile of food. We followed an old, half-buried highway. I had memorized the map's contours, seeking out areas where the wind-scoured snow would offer the easiest travel. Every mile had to count. By the 4th hour, the sun hadn't risen. It had merely clarified the sky to a slightly less ominous shade of pewter. And the novelty had worn off. The sleds were heavy, despite the short rations. Each contained a thermal tent, 3 days of personal emergency food, a scavenged solar panel, and tools. The Level 1 exiles, who had always been paid to work inside, quickly began to struggle. The bunker elite, who were academics, engineers, and administrators, possessed physical stamina that was either surprisingly good, Erick, Shanna, or shockingly poor. A Level 1 exile named Jerry. Jerry was one of the slackers Carrick had gleefully thrown out. He was a decent enough man who mostly made his living running a numbers racket in the back alleys of Level 1, a job that required wits, not muscle. He was paired with a quiet, elderly bunker librarian named Rosa. I noticed him first through Tyler, who kept glancing back. Maeve, Jerry's slowing down, Tyler muttered, his voice tight. I didn't turn. He needs to keep the pace. We don't stop for an hour. He's dragging Rosa's sled too. She's struggling with the harness. Then she should leave her harness empty and focus on her own feet, I snapped. I felt cruel, but I was leading 112 people, not holding a funeral. Look, I relented and glanced back. Jerry was leaning heavily into his rope, his shoulders hunched. The sled he was supposed to be pulling, the one carrying his group's fuel and half-tent, was tipping into a snowdrift. He wasn't breathing, he was gasping. I walked a few more steps, waiting for him to correct the sled. He didn't. He stopped completely and slumped forward, hands on his knees, body shaking. Rosa, the librarian, stopped next to him, her face white with exhaustion and fear. I stopped the entire column. 112 people halted, their collective exhalation sounding like a sigh of doom. "Jerry!" I shouted, the word whipped away by the wind. I broke rank and walked back, Tyler following close behind. Erick, seeing the halt, strode forward from the center, his long legs eating up the distance. When I reached Jerry, he was coughing, a wet, rattling sound. "Get up, Jerry," I said, my voice low and hard. "You stop, you freeze. We stop, we die." He looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot and teary, not from cold, but from strain. "Maeve, I can't. My lungs. I haven't been outside in 10 years. I can't breathe this air." Erick arrived, kneeling immediately beside Jerry. His actions were swift, professional. He reached into his coat and pulled out a thermal pad, sticking it to Jerry's chest. "Respiratory distress," Erick stated, not looking at me. "The cold shock is overwhelming his alveoli. He needs a shelter, heat, and oxygen." "He gets none of that," I said flatly. "We keep moving." Erick finally looked up, his blue eyes intense. "He won't make the next mile, Maeve. He needs a break now, or he'll collapse permanently." "Then he collapses." My stomach twisted, but I held my gaze steady. "We cannot waste the collective body heat of 112 people for one man's respite. If we stop, everyone freezes." A few of the bunker people behind us murmured their assent, nodding to Erick. They might be academics, but they understood the cold calculus of resource management. "Maeve, he's one of ours," Tyler pleaded, taking a half step toward Jerry. "He's a weakness right now," I said, the words cutting even me. "He needs to drop his sled." "Rosa, take the harness." Rosa, trembling, took the thick rope from Jerry's hands. "Jerry, walk. No harness. Just walk," I commanded. "If you fall more than 5 meters behind, we will not wait." Jerry nodded, his face gray. He stumbled to his feet and began to shuffle. Erick rose and faced me, his face grim. "That was unnecessary." "Survival is unnecessary? We just established the rules, Erick. No debate. No breaking the pace. We don't have enough food for a 6-week recovery camp." "I am questioning the efficiency of your rule, not the rule itself," he countered, his voice steady. "We could have temporarily redistributed his load. His collapse will cost us more time than a 5-minute rest." "It costs us more to show weakness," I retorted, letting my anger show. "They need to know the white is less forgiving than I am." He didn't argue further, just gave me a long, penetrating look, a look that acknowledged my authority but reserved judgment on my morality. It was both frustrating and strangely compelling. Hour 8, the breaking point. We pushed on for 3 more hours. The terrain shifted from icy-packed snow to deeper, wind-scoured drifts. The pace slowed by half. The Level 1 group was exhausted, and the bunker people were learning that academic knowledge meant nothing when a 15-kilo sled harness was cutting into your shoulders. Jerry held on for almost 2 hours, fueled by sheer panic. He was shuffling, weaving, but moving. Tyler kept glancing back, and I kept my focus forward, walking with a brutal metronomic cadence. Then, at hour 8, as the sun finally crested a distant, jagged ridge, Jerry's will broke. I heard the sound rather than saw it, a heavy, muffled thump, followed by the cry of his partner, Rosa. "Jerry! He's fallen." I stopped. The column stopped. The only sound was the wind, and the collective labored breathing. "Maeve, he's not getting up," Tyler said, already halfway back. I turned slowly. Jerry was a dark lump, already sinking into the new fallen powder. Rosa was kneeling beside him, trying in vain to turn his body over. I walked back. Erick was already there, pulling Jerry's stiff gloves off and checking his neck for a pulse. "He's gone," Erick said quietly, looking at me. It was too fast. 8 hours. It shouldn't have been 8 hours. It should have been a week, a month, but the cold, the strain, and the sheer terror had stopped his heart. He was already cold. The white had begun to claim him. Rosa let out a desolate, small wail. Dave, Shanna's husband, came up, looking sick. "What do we do?" Dave asked. The panic in his voice barely contained. I felt a surge of cold control. This was the moment. The decision I made now would define this expedition. "We don't stop," I stated, my voice echoing unnaturally in the sudden stillness. "We move. We deal with the body." Tyler was staring at Jerry, shock replacing worry. "Maeve, we have to at least bury him. Give him some dignity. We waste an hour digging a grave, we lose 10 more people to the cold," I countered, looking at the assembled column. I needed them to see my conviction. I needed them to see the reality. Erick stood up. He reached down and gently closed Jerry's eyes. He looked at me, a silent challenge in his blue gaze. Maeve, we need a moment. For morale, this is the first death. We can't just leave him in the snow. Yes, we can, I said, my voice shattering the illusion of human decency. He is frozen weight. He is an object. He was a man. Rosa sobbed, clutching at my coat. I gently but firmly pushed her hands away. He was a resource that ran out. We honor him by not joining him. Shanna, take Rosa. Tyler, you and Dave will handle the disposal. Disposal? Tyler was horrified. We take his outer clothing, his boots, and his emergency food ration, I instructed, my eyes sweeping the crowd. They were watching, wide-eyed, horrified. Erick, you will strip him quickly. Tyler, you and Dave will place him back into the drift, cover him, and mark the spot. We spend no more than 5 minutes on this. After that, we move. Erick didn't object this time, but the look he gave me was a condemnation. He knelt down immediately, his movements efficient and precise, tearing Jerry's clothes with clinical detachment. Tyler looked sick, but his loyalty won out. He and Dave quickly followed Erick's lead, prying the frozen boots off the corpse and pulling the knife from Jerry's belt. In the midst of this brutal, silent operation, one of the bunker people, a stout man named Arthur, began to whisper loudly to his partner. This is madness. She's a savage. We followed her because she was supposed to be a guide, not a dictator. The whispers spread. I heard murmurs of murder and barbaric. I turned my back on the body and faced the column. Arthur, I called out, my voice ringing with sudden, cold clarity. Do you have a better plan? Arthur straightened, emboldened by the support of his peers. We should have rested. We should be moving slower. We should have waited for the snow to stop. This pace is killing us. This pace is our only chance, I countered. The 12 days of food is already counting down. Every hour we waste, we get 1/40th to the power of th closer to starvation. If you think I am a dictator, you are welcome to take your sled and your group and go back to Mall City. They will be happy to let you in. I gestured to the vast, empty expanse behind us. The threat was empty, but effective. Everyone knew the gate would not open. Arthur, you are stripped of your group's emergency food for 1 day, I announced. That is your penalty for questioning command in the field. Your group will rely on the main supply until tomorrow morning. Now, fall in line. The air crackled with hostility. Arthur paled but lowered his head and backed into the column. Erick stood up, handing me a small, heavy parcel, Jerry's neatly folded rations and a blood-red scarf. His expression was impossible to read, a perfect blend of professional detachment and profound human sorrow. 5 minutes, he stated. We move. I took the scarf and tied it to the top of my own sled, a crude, silent banner of remembrance, and a public acknowledgement of the cost of my decision. The 112 had shrunk to 111. I looked at the column. The shock and fear were still there, but now, a new element had been introduced. Absolute, terrifying obedience. They knew I meant what I said. They knew the white had eyes, and the first lesson had been paid in blood. I turned, pulled my rope, and started walking again. The 810 miles had officially begun. The first night, we walked until the wind shifted, carrying the sound of something large moving in the distance, the deep, guttural howl of a white wolf. The sun had set hours ago, and the only light came from the cold, indifferent stars and the faint, unsettling glow of the snow itself. I stopped the column without a word, raising a gloved fist. We had made barely 20 miles, a pathetic distance for the first day, but 20 miles further than Jerry. We stop here, I stated, pulling the heavy pack from my shoulders. Set up the tents, no fires. Use the tablets sparingly. The process was slow, fueled by exhaustion and fear. The level 1 exiles were inept, fumbling with the unfamiliar thermal tents. The bunker elite, though physically depleted, worked with mechanical efficiency, their academic minds quickly mastering the engineering of the setup. I watched Erick manage the logistics. He moved with a focused calm, setting up the main food tent and directing the struggling groups without shouting. When he saw me watching, he paused, his blue eyes catching the starlight. The look was still one of cold respect, but it was edged with a new, complex tension, the shared memory of Jerry's death binding us in a grim intimacy. We need a watch schedule, he said, walking over. His shadow fell over me, cutting the slight starlight. Tyler, Dave and I will take the main shifts, I replied. The rest of the level 1 people don't have the discipline. Use your people, the ones who look like they can hold a knife. Erick nodded. Shanna will organize the rota. She's good with details. Speaking of details, I asked, meeting his gaze, your people have the best gear, the knowledge of the past, and a clear destination. Why, specifically, Penn Valley, California? Why are you fleeing Arizona? And why that far? And why did you have to go through Carrick to get there? He hesitated, his answer already forming behind a smooth bureaucratic mask. It was the designated rendezvous point, a prearranged signal, a contingency. Contingency for what? You came out of your 50-year overdue bunker starving. You traded your location, your home, for 3 weeks of rations that turned out to be 3 days. You don't have a rendezvous, you have a desperate hope. His jaw tightened. Maeve, our reasons are our own. The point is, Penn Valley is where the survival odds are highest for our skill set. That's all you need to know to guide us. My survival odds just dropped because of your secrecy, I snapped. And what is Shanna to you? She seems to run almost equal command. Is she your partner, your co-leader, or something else entirely? Erick looked past me, his expression softening subtly before he caught himself. Shanna is the medical officer, my sister-in-law, and a highly capable member of our council. Sister-in-law. The evasiveness was maddening. So she's family, yet you two have a political dynamic that feels closer than that. You're hiding something. I am securing the privacy of my people, he stated, the low tenor of his voice turning to steel. Your priority is the root. Mine is the survival of the collective. Let's keep to our duties. He turned away, dismissing the conversation. The cold air suddenly felt charged with suppressed fury. Shared shelter. My anger simmered as I helped Tyler set up our tent. Our thermal tents were minimalist, a tight, low-slung dome designed to capture maximum body heat. They were single-sex, 2-person shelters. Tyler and I shared one, Erick and Shanna the other. But the plan changed abruptly. Tyler came back, his face white with cold. Maeve, the librarian. Rosa, she's not stopping shaking. I put her in with Ellen, but Shanna thinks they should share body heat with a third. She's pairing Shanna with Dave and putting me with the librarian. It'll be too cold for one person alone. I nodded, assessing the risk. It made sense. Rosa had watched a man die. She needed the warmth and the reassurance. And Erick? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He's with you, Tyler said simply, handing me a small, flickering thermal tablet. He needs a separate shelter for the watch rotation, and you're the only other guide. Good night. The air left my lungs. Erick and me. Alone. I climbed into the narrow, dark dome. The tent smelled faintly of synthetic fabric and snow. I unrolled my sleeping bag and crawled in, fully clothed, except for my outer parka. A minute later, the flap unzipped, and Erick slid inside, pulling the zip shut behind him. The small space immediately shrank. The flickering light from the thermal tablet on the floor was just enough to illuminate his face. The chiseled features, the strong jaw, the piercing blue eyes that were currently focused on setting up his own gear with practiced, indifferent calm. He unzipped his own sleeping bag, placing it inches from mine. The entire space between us was no more than a few hand widths. We need to talk about the incident with Arthur, he said, his voice a low rumble in the tight space. He needs to understand the chain of command, but public humiliation will breed resentment. Resentment is a side effect, I countered, zipping my bag up to my chin. The effect is obedience. He was stirring up trouble, using Jerry's death to undermine me. I shut it down. End of discussion. But it was effective, he pressed, leaning back on his elbow, facing me. The look on your face when you commanded them to strip the body. That was cold, Maeve. Calculated. It made them fear you. Good, I whispered fiercely. Fear is what keeps them moving when exhaustion tells them to stop. It's what kept me alive for 3 months alone in the Deadlands. I'm not a politician, Erick. I'm a survivor. I know what you are, he replied, his voice suddenly softer, more intimate. You're fierce, uncompromising, and you took command when my people were collapsing. You saved them today. The unexpected praise, delivered in the dark, tight space, hit me harder than any criticism. I felt my defenses soften, my heart beating a faster, unfamiliar rhythm. Don't, I muttered, turning my face toward the nylon wall. Don't use flattery. It's not flattery. It's the truth, he insisted, his voice closer now. I could feel his breath, warm and shallow, on the back of my neck. You have a capacity for necessary cruelty. I respect that. My people don't know the cost of survival. You do. He reached out a gloved hand and gently, almost reverently, touched the bright red scarf tied to the zipper of my bag, Jerry's scarf. Why did you keep this? He asked. As a reminder, I choked out, fighting the sudden lump in my throat. Of the cost. Of the choice I made. So I don't get soft. You won't get soft, he assured me. His hand left the scarf, traveling instead to the hood of my coat, which was pulled up around my face. He pushed the fur lining back slightly, revealing my cheek. The touch was a shock, warm yet demanding. He wasn't asking for permission. He was simply claiming a space. You're a warrior, Maeve, he whispered. You look at the white and you see an enemy. My people see a problem to be solved. I turned my head to face him fully. Our eyes met in the near darkness. He was so close I could see the dark border of his blue irises. The air was suffocating, thick with unspoken tension, the exhaustion of the day, the shock of death, and the desperate, primal need for warmth and connection in a world that offered only ice. And what do you see? I challenged, my voice barely audible. I see the reason we might actually make it, he said. He leaned in, slow and deliberate. I knew I should pull back, shout, or slap him. This was not professional. This was dangerous. But the heat of his presence, the honesty in his eyes, and the sheer raw need for an anchor in this chaotic void overwhelmed my survival instinct. I met him halfway. The kiss was furious, a clash of desperation and relief. It wasn't tender. It was a hungry, open-mouthed seizure, driven by adrenaline and the icy chill surrounding us. My hands, still gloved, went to the back of his neck, pulling him deeper. He tasted like cold air and mint, the faint flavor of whatever bunker ration toothpaste he used. His lips were firm, demanding, and utterly compelling. It was a kiss of shared fear, shared responsibility, and shared defiance against the death that had just claimed Jerry. It was primal, necessary, and completely wrong. After a long moment, he broke away, resting his forehead against mine, both of us gasping for breath in the cramped, airless space. Maeve, he whispered, his voice rough. No, I cut him off, the word a raw exhalation. I pushed gently against his chest until he leaned back, breaking the contact. The cold air rushed into the space where his warmth had been. That never happened. We are the command structure. We are focused on survival. That was a moment of weakness. It ends now. He paused, his eyes gleaming in the dark, the conflict in his expression mirroring my own. He understood. Control was everything. Understood, he said, his voice regaining its professional steel, though the change felt forced. He turned onto his back, pulling his bag up to his chin. We'll take a 2-hour sleep shift, then 3-hour watches. Good, I replied, my voice shaking only slightly. I turned my back to him, facing the nylon wall, my body still tingling with the aftermath of the kiss. The tent suddenly felt both too small and too empty. Day 2, the frozen city. I woke before the alarm, the cold seeping through the sleeping bag. Erick was gone, presumably on watch. I felt the familiar, heavy dread, layered with the confusing, volatile memory of the night. It never happened. I repeated the lie to myself, needing to believe it. By the time the sun, the gray disk of the sun, finally showed, we were packed and moving. The pace was still slow, but today, no one questioned the necessity. Jerry's absence was a palpable, chilling lesson. Tyler looked tired, but resolute. Rosa was stoic, holding the harness tightly. Erick, coming off watch, looked composed, his expression giving nothing away. He avoided my eyes, but when he gave me the morning assessment, wind speed, visibility, predicted temperature drop, his fingers brushed mine. A brief, sharp electric shock, gone in an instant. We marched for 10 hours. The terrain flattened out, exposing us to a savage, relentless wind that seemed to come from the pole itself. The snow was endless, broken only by the occasional half-buried shell of an old transport truck. Just as the sun began its swift descent, Tyler shouted, "Maeve, look!" Ahead, shrouded in a gauze of falling snow, rose the dark skeletal outline of a city. Not a mall city, a true, pre-freeze metropolis. It looked like a field of granite teeth jutting from the snow. My heart pounded. Cities were dangerous, full of hidden caches, but also full of squatters, rival gangs, or worse, the mutated creatures that sometimes hunted in the outer zones. But we were freezing, and the next stretch of the map was barren. "We go in," I announced, pulling the column to a halt. "It's a risk, but we need shelter, heat, and supplies. We'll find a stable structure to make camp." Erick immediately came forward. "I agree. We need to scavenge immediately. The children need caloric density. We're dangerously low." "Exactly," I said, meeting his eyes across the short distance. The tension was back, no longer romantic, but pragmatic. "We are going in. We are not splitting up. We find a structure, secure it, and then we forage." As we approached, the scale of the ruin became overwhelming. Towers of black glass and steel, frozen solid, coated in a century of ice. This wasn't a dead land. It was a frozen tomb. I led the column to a wide, low structure, an old shopping center or convention center, built like a concrete bunker. It had been mostly spared the collapse. The entry door was warped and jammed with ice. "Tyler, Dave, break it open," I commanded. We had found shelter, but the hardest part was about to begin. The scavenging run, the true test of this fragile, exhausted collective, was set to take place in the cold, echoing canyons of the dead. Chapter 6. The First Victory and the First Lie. Tyler and Dave strained against the frozen metal of the entrance, their breaths clouding the air. The old convention center was built like a pillbox, thick concrete, few windows. After several minutes of grunting and metallic groans, the warped door finally buckled inward with a sound like a rifle shot, showering the entrance with ice shards. The blast of air that rushed out was stale, frigid, and utterly empty. "Clear," Dave announced, coughing. "Inside, quickly," I ordered. "Tyler, set perimeter watches at the door. Erick, I need you to lead the search for an inner space, something easily defensible, with minimal access points. Kyle, check the structure for stability. We are not setting up in a collapse zone. The groups, galvanized by the promise of warmth and safety, shuffled into the gloom. The interior was a vast, echoing space, its ceilings vaulted and high. Century-old dust motes danced in the beams of our scavenged, battery-powered lamps. It felt less like a city, and more like a cathedral dedicated to the past. Erick quickly found what we needed, an old, sectioned-off conference area deep within the structure. It had thick walls, a single narrow entry, and a ceiling that looked structurally sound. The morale boost. Within the hour, the chaos transformed into organization. Tyler and Dave secured the main entry. Kyle assessed the conference room structure, giving us a cautious thumbs up. Shanna directed the setup of the tents, placing the children's sleds nearest the core area. Maeve, Shanna called, her voice sharp with excitement. Look at this. She pointed to a deep groove in the concrete wall of the room. It was an old maintenance conduit, but it offered a brilliant, unexpected advantage. A small, shielded alcove. It's a perfect chimney, I realized. We can build a small fire here. The smoke will dissipate into the ventilation shafts without venting outside. This was a major victory. For the first time, we could have genuine, radiative heat without advertising our location. Erick, put out the word, I commanded. We are lighting the first fire. Everyone is to contribute one scavenged stick or piece of paper to this fire, a symbolic gesture of warmth. Erick nodded, his eyes bright with approval. The small, bureaucratic victory was a needed tonic for his soul. Soon, a low, controlled flame flickered in the alcove, casting dancing shadows across the concrete. People clustered around it, their hands held out, their faces reflecting the simple, profound joy of manufactured heat. The morale surged immediately, a wave of collective relief washing away the grimness of Jerry's death. The scavenge, a frozen treasure. While the group settled, I took Kyle and a small 4-person scavenging crew, 2 level 1 exiles, 2 bunker elite, to explore the immediate vicinity. We needed a better food supply. The best structures to check are old commercial ones, Kyle noted, consulting a small device that seemed to be an ancient structural scanner. They were often sealed tight and insulated. Food stores might still be viable if the temperatures remained consistently below freezing. We found a breach in a service wall that led us into an adjacent, interconnected building. My lamp beam swept across the interior, revealing aisles, shelves, and checkout lanes. A supermarket, I whispered, awe mixing with disbelief. It was a time capsule. Carts still stood abandoned, some filled with plastic bags holding products a century old. Everything was coated in rime frost. Go for the dry goods in the freezers first, I instructed. Look for dense, high-calorie items. The freezers were mostly useless. The power had been cut for decades, and the contents were frozen blocks of unrecognizable mush. But in the dry goods aisle, we hit a jackpot. We found shelves full of frozen dried legumes, beans and lentils, preserved by the sub-zero temperatures. We also found bags of crystallized sugar, which would be vital for energy, and, most surprisingly, stacks of chocolate bars, their packaging brittle, but the contents perfectly preserved by the cold. Kyle was focused and methodical. Maeve, focus on the legumes. They are high protein and calorie dense. The moisture content is negligible, so they are shelf stable in this climate. The sugar and chocolate are energy, but the protein is survival. The level 1 exiles, who knew little of nutrition but understood scarcity, were mesmerized by the bounty. Chocolate, one whispered, tears welling up in his eyes. He hadn't seen something so decadent since childhood. We loaded our sleds quickly, using thick canvas bags. As we worked, I noticed Kyle retrieving something from a shattered pharmacy section, small, cylindrical tubes. What's that? I asked. Medical supplies, he replied simply. Bandages, antibiotics, they're freeze-dried. They might still work. With our bounty secured, we made a second trip, pulling out enough food to make a substantial morale-boosting meal. Back at the camp, the frozen legumes went into large, scavenged metal pots, cooked over the controlled fire with melted snow. The result was a thick, smoky, warming stew that smelled like life itself. Even without salt or spice, the hot meal transformed the mood. People ate slowly, reverently, their eyes closed. I distributed small squares of the century-old chocolate to the children. Their quiet delight was the sweetest sound I'd heard since leaving Mall City. The predicament, the wolf and the bear. As the camp settled into a quiet hum of satisfied exhaustion, I pulled Erick, Shanna, and Tyler aside, leading them back to the quiet of the entry corridor. We have a problem, I began, my voice low. We've been tracked since we left the gate. A white wolf. It's massive, smart, and it followed us right to this city. It's hungry. Tyler's hand instantly went to his knife. We need to hunt it now. Before it gets desperate. Exactly, I affirmed. It's near the main entrance. Its tracking days are over. We kill it tonight. Erick, Shanna, you're the most rested. Tyler, you know my hunting methods. We go in 3 hours, after everyone has eaten and settled. Agreed, Erick said, his eyes focused and cold. But we need more than a wolf. We need sustainable calories. The legumes are good, but we need fat and meat. I saw sign a mile back, I revealed. Not a deer, not a hare. Something bigger. A bear. The temperature in the corridor seemed to drop further. Bears were rare in the dead of winter, usually hibernating. This one was desperate. Or sick, or both. A winter bear is a risk we can't afford, Shanna stated immediately, her clinical assessment overriding the need for meat. They're unpredictable, aggressive, and a failed kill risks catastrophic injury to our core team. But a bear is 3 weeks of solid fat and protein, I countered. We take the wolf tonight. We track the bear at first light. We need this win, Shanna. Erick nodded slowly. The wolf is a definite kill. The bear is a high-risk, high-reward assessment. We need the reward. We'll track the wolf tonight and reassess the bear in the morning. The secret weapon. The three of us, Maeve, Erick, and Tyler, slipped out 3 hours later. The city was a maze of deep shadows and wind-whipped snow. We moved silently toward the main entrance. I led the way, relying on my deep knowledge of tracking and hunting. I found the wolf's prints, massive, heavy, indicating a prime male. It was intelligent. It was using the wind and the cover of the ruins. We stopped behind a collapsed concrete barricade 50 meters from the entrance. The wind howled, covering the sounds of our movements. It's right there, I whispered, pointing to the shadows near the jammed door. 2 glowing eyes reflected the faint starlight. It's waiting for us to leave. Tyler, you flank right. I'll take the left when I give the signal. Before I could finish, the wolf shifted, sensing us. It let out a chilling, territorial snarl and started moving toward the entrance. Now, I hissed, raising my scavenged repeating crossbow. I took aim. The bolt was fast, silent, and true. It struck the wolf's shoulder, eliciting a sharp yelp, but not a kill. The bolt was deflected by bone. The wolf, enraged, turned its attention to me. I cycled the mechanism, but before I could fire, a sound cut through the wind, a sharp, mechanical crack. The sound of a gunshot. The wolf convulsed, let out a final, pained whimper, and collapsed instantly. The single shot had struck it cleanly behind the eye. It was dead before it hit the snow. I slowly lowered my crossbow, staring at the thick smoke curling from the barrel of the weapon in Erick's hand. It was a heavy, military-grade semi-automatic rifle, pristine and perfectly maintained. He had drawn it from an inner, zippered pocket of his coat. Tyler was stunned into silence. I turned on Erick, my voice barely above a whisper, laced with a rage that shook me to my core. What is that? Erick, oblivious or indifferent to my shock, was already moving toward the downed wolf. A rifle. Saves time. I grabbed his arm, forcing him to stop. A rifle, Erick? A working rifle? Tyler and I haul crossbows and blades, and you have this? How many others? He sighed, the sound exasperated, not apologetic. About 20. Standard issue for any long-range expedition. Standard issue? You mean your bunker standard issue? I spat, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. You've known since Mall City that we're moving through hostile territory. You let Jerry die of exposure, and you had a weapon that could have dropped him a rabbit from 50 yards, and you said nothing. It's a security measure, Maeve, he replied, his voice dangerously low. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed in my emotional outburst. A highly volatile security measure. We didn't know you, or the people Erick exiled, were trustworthy. Guns create internal conflict, Maeve. The knowledge of their existence creates a power imbalance. We had to trust your command first. You don't trust my command, I hissed, tightening my grip on his arm. You tested it. You let me hang my authority on a cold, brutal decision about Jerry, when all the while you had the means to soften that blow. You allowed the entire group to believe we were vulnerable, to foster obedience through fear, when your people had the ultimate power all along. My anger was fueled by betrayal, not just the deception, but the calculated cruelty of it. He had allowed me to become the monster, while reserving the true power for himself. Your methods were effective, Erick countered, his eyes finally meeting mine, cold and hard. You established command. That rifle would have undermined the fragile trust we were trying to build. Now that you are established, the guns are a resource. A secret resource, I corrected, shaking my head in disbelief. What else are you hiding? Why are we really going to Penn Valley? He didn't answer, simply pulling his arm free. He gave me a final, challenging look, a mix of justification and warning. The wolf is killed. Let's process the meat and get this prize back to camp. The discussion on strategy can wait until we have full bellies. He didn't wait for my reply, walking to the wolf with the heavy rifle still slung casually over his shoulder. I stood there, trembling, watching him. The kiss we shared last night, the moment of raw, desperate connection, suddenly felt like part of the lie, a maneuver to keep me compliant. Tyler walked up to me, his eyes fixed on the rifle. Maeve, is this true? They have more of those? Yes, I said, my voice flat. And we are going to use them. But first, we are going to establish a new order of command. I walked toward the dead wolf, the scent of fresh blood sharp in the frozen air. The survival odds had just gone up, but the political complexity had become a deadly tangle. We had secured a huge victory over the white, but I had just stumbled onto a far more dangerous enemy, the lies of my own command structure. The 111 people were fed, but their guide was now at war with her co-leader. Chapter 7. The White Wall and the Reckoning. The mood in the makeshift camp was tense but energized. The wolf meat was hanging in the freezing corridor, a promise of sustained life. The discovery of the supermarket bounty, the legumes and chocolate, had quieted the complaints about short rations. But the air still hummed with the silent, poisonous knowledge of the guns. I spent the morning reinforcing the command structure. I pulled Erick, Shanna, and Tyler into a meeting, along with Dave and Kyle. Jack stood watch silently outside the improvised meeting circle. "The rules are changing again," I began, my voice cold and steady. "First, the truth. Erick's group has 21 semi-automatic rifles and ample ammunition. They are the property of the collective, and will be issued only on my command for specific security and hunting purposes." I ignored Erick's subtle wince of frustration. Tyler, though still reeling from the shock, nodded grimly. Shanna, ever the pragmatist, simply took notes. "Second, the bear," I continued. "We need the fat. We're going in a large group. We cannot afford a failure or an injury. Erick, your rifles will be the primary kill mechanism. Tyler and I will lead the tracking and the final processing. Shanna, you will remain here and lead the triage team. Kyle, you will monitor weather and structure stability. Jax, you are on perimeter security here with Ellen. We leave in 1 hour." I looked directly at Erick, letting the full weight of my distrust show. "The rifles are under my ultimate authority. Any unauthorized use of a weapon will be considered an act of mutiny." Erick met my gaze, a flicker of something raw, frustration mixed with a grudging respect, in his blue eyes. "Understood, Commander," he said, the title laced with a subtle challenge. The hunt for the bear. We set out an hour later, 10 people, including me, Erick, Tyler, Dave for his brute strength, and 6 reliable bunker elite members who were now issued rifles and positioned for perimeter security. The tracks were massive, clawed depressions in the century-old ice. The bear was moving slowly, erratically, a sure sign of a starving or sick animal that should be hibernating. I led the tracking for 7 arduous hours, using every lesson the white had ever taught me. We were deep into the ruins of the city, navigating canyons of black, frozen skyscrapers. The architecture was both majestic and terrifying, a vast, silent graveyard that magnified every sound. Finally, we cornered it deep within the basement of an old bank vault. The massive beast was half-starved, its roar echoing terrifyingly off the stone walls. The hunt was brutal, fast, and clinical. Tyler and I used flares to distract and blind the bear, drawing its focus away from the armed perimeter. When it turned, snarling and stumbling toward the light, Erick gave the command. The synchronized cracks of the rifles were deafening in the enclosed space. The bear dropped instantly, massive and silent. The relief was immense, quickly replaced by the cold, grueling work of processing the carcass. It was a goldmine of fat, meat, and fur. It was enough to feed the group full rations for nearly 2 weeks, and provide valuable insulating pelts. We worked for 2 hours, stripping the fat and meat from the bone, loading the heavy portions onto our sleds. We secured the remaining carcass inside the vault, marking it for later use. The White Wall descends. We started the 7-hour trudge back to the convention center, our sleds heavy with the first true victory of the expedition. The group was buoyant, despite the exhaustion. Then, at hour 4 of the return journey, the White Wall descended. The change was instantaneous. The wind, which had been a steady, biting companion, turned into a screaming physical force. Visibility dropped from 50 meters to 5, then to barely 1. It was pulverized ice, driven horizontally by the gale, stinging exposed skin like needles, and turning the world into a blinding, featureless white blur. "Storm!" I screamed, pulling my hood tight. "Line up! Rope yourselves together! Don't let go!" Tyler immediately took the rear of the line. I led the line, relying entirely on the memory of the ruins' geometry. I felt the sudden, agonizing jerk of my own harness as the sled snagged. I dug my boots into the ice, anchoring myself to the ground. Then, a large form crashed into me, slamming the air from my lungs. It was Erick. He had broken from the line, risking his own safety to anchor the lead sled, which was sliding dangerously toward a hidden ravine. He didn't speak. He just wrapped his powerful arm around my chest, pinning me to the ground, and used the weight of his body and his anchor line to stabilize the sled. The wind howled over us, turning the snow into abrasive sand. We lay there for what felt like an eternity, pressed chest to back, breathing the same air, sharing the terrifying, immediate warmth of sheer survival. "You okay?" he roared into my ear. "Fine," I rasped, struggling to regain my breath. I pushed myself up, pulling him with me. "We need to finish the square. Now!" We spent the next 3 hours working in the blinding snow, eventually constructing a makeshift shelter, the sleds forming a small, stable perimeter around the bundled people. We stumbled into the convention center corridor 7 hours after the storm hit. We had lost nothing, and we had brought back life. Days of isolation. The storm raged outside for the next 3 days. The air vents funneled the wind's roar into a constant, deafening sound. Visibility even in the main corridor was poor. Movement stopped entirely. We were trapped. The morale, initially boosted by the hot bear stew and the promise of the rifles, began to fray. The confined space, the incessant noise, and the grim reality of our situation bred resentment and fear. I maintained a rigorous schedule. 2 hours of chores, 1 hour of weapons training, unloaded rifles only, taught by Erick and Dave, and 1 hour of lesson, taught by Shanna, focusing on wilderness first aid, and Kyle, focusing on engineering principles. I avoided Erick. The discovery of the guns had cemented my distrust, yet the terrifying intimacy of the storm, his reliance on me, had deepened the raw attraction. We communicated only in clipped, necessary commands. During the confinement, I found myself drawn to Ellen and Jax. Ellen, with her calm maternal presence, kept the infirm stable and gently mediated small disputes. Jax, meanwhile, observed. "They're getting restless," Jax murmured to me once, nodding toward the bunker group. "They're used to schedules, not waiting. They need to know what happens if the meat runs out before the snow stops." Her pragmatism was chillingly insightful. I knew the moment the meat ran out, the political fragility of the camp would shatter. The reckoning. On the third night, the noise of the storm reached a fever pitch, rattling the very structure of the building. The air inside the tents was stale and heavy with unreleased tension. I was alone in my small tent, reviewing the map by the light of a tiny thermal tablet, when the zipper slowly pulled down. Erick slipped inside. He didn't speak. He simply pulled the zipper shut, extinguishing the thermal tablet with a flick of his wrist. The darkness was absolute. The roar of the blizzard outside filled the void of silence. "We can't," I whispered, the words choked with the need to enforce my own rules. "The lie is too loud," he murmured, his voice rough. "The distrust is infecting the whole camp. We brought back life today, and yet we stand here further apart than ever." He didn't move to touch me, but the sheer force of his presence in the narrow space was overwhelming. The air felt thick, charged with the exhaustion, the fear, and the lingering, unresolved fury from the previous days. "You should have told me about the rifles," I said, my voice shaking with cold anger. "I know," he admitted, the simple honesty, a sudden, potent weapon. "I made a mistake in withholding it. I prioritized my group's internal security over yours. I chose the politician's method over the warriors. And you let me take the blame for Jerry," I accused. "That was your choice, Maeve," he countered, his words clipped. "You chose the necessary cruelty to establish command. I merely allowed the perception to stand." His words were infuriatingly rational, yet the proximity in the dark made the intellectual argument irrelevant. The anger was a shield, but the cold, the deep, penetrating cold that a small fire couldn't touch, demanded warmth. "The tension is higher than the blizzard," he stated, his voice now barely a breath. "We need to clear the slate. For the sake of the command." He reached out, and his hand found mine in the dark. His palm was rough, calloused from the hunt and the sled rope. He didn't pull, he just held it, a firm, grounding contact. "We need a moment of honesty," he whispered, before the next mile. I didn't resist. I was tired of fighting the world, and I was tired of fighting him. The cold was a constant ache, and his touch was the only reprieve. I pulled my hand free, only to wrap my arms around his neck, pulling him down to me. The kiss was the explosion I had been waiting for. It was a chaotic, furious collision of lips and teeth, driven by months of isolation and the adrenaline of shared, near-death experiences. It was a desperate search for warmth and validation in a hostile universe. He rolled, pressing me into the sleeping bag, his large body a sudden, intoxicating shield against the cold. The heavy scent of gunpowder, cold steel and fresh snow mingled with the primal, musky warmth of his skin. We didn't speak again. The storm outside was our music, the danger our aphrodisiac. It was an hour of necessary forgetfulness, a complete surrender to the primal need for human contact in the face of absolute extinction. It was raw, uninhibited, and completely selfish. Breaking camp. The next morning, the storm had broken. The silence was shocking, the air outside brittle and clear. The world was pristine, a landscape of dazzling white that promised a clean slate. I was awake before him. I slipped out of the sleeping bag, my body aching, my mind already rushing forward. I dressed quickly, shoving the memory of the night into a cold, dark vault in my mind. When Erick awoke, he looked at me, his blue eyes holding a complex mix of intimacy, question, and regret. I didn't give him a chance to speak. "The snow is packed hard. The visibility is optimal," I announced, my voice clipped, professional, and devoid of warmth. "We leave in 1 hour. Get your command team ready." I zipped open the tent, leaving him alone in the sudden, silent light. I walked out into the cold, clear morning, the fresh snow crunching under my boots. The 111 had survived the first major trial. We had meat, we had shelter, and we had a leader who understood the cost of every step. The memory of the night was simply a moment of necessary weakness that would never be acknowledged again. We had 790 miles left to go. The air of the convention center was sharp and cold, still carrying the faint metallic tang of bear blood and the stale, recycled breath of 111 nervous people. The blizzard had broken, leaving behind a world transformed. A blinding, pristine white sheet laid over the earth, smoothed by the wind's furious work. It was beautiful, treacherous, and utterly silent. I moved with mechanical focus, shoving the memory of the previous night deep into the cold vault of my mind. The raw, desperate warmth shared with the man I distrusted most. It was a glitch in the program, a momentary weakness born of exhaustion and terror. It would not be acknowledged. Ever. When Erick emerged from the tent, his face was impassive, his blue eyes guarded. He gave me a brief, non-committal nod as he began directing his rifle team. I matched his professionalism, my voice clipped and strictly focused on logistics. The unspoken rules of our co-command were reinforced with every clipped order. The night was a void. The mission was the only reality. "Tyler, take the lead sled with Jax," I commanded. "We're using the packed snow while it lasts. I need maximum pace today. We need to put serious distance between us and this temporary luxury." "Yes, Maeve," Tyler said, his loyalty a solid, comforting presence. Jax, quiet and observant, simply secured her knife sheath and took her position beside him. Her presence, a representative of Level 1 street-hardened resilience, was a subtle but necessary counterweight to the bunker elite's armed security. The column departed the city ruins precisely on time, the grinding sound of the sled runners on the packed snow, the only disturbance in the vast, cold silence. The first hours were excellent. The flat, wind-scoured terrain allowed us to maintain a pace I hadn't dared hope for, putting several crucial miles between us and the last known sign of civilization. We were making good time, but the need for clear understanding of the full mission parameters gnawed at me. During the midday meal, huddled around small, tightly managed thermal fires, I approached Erick while he was checking the pressure regulators on a sled. "Penn Valley," I said, my voice low enough to be lost in the wind's low moan. "The destination. Give me something I can plan with." "Why there?" "You said it's where you hope to fix things." "Fix what, exactly? What is so structurally vital about that city?" Erick paused, his eyes fixed on the regulator, his hands moving with meticulous care. He stalled, his answer forming behind a smooth, evasive wall. "It's the only pre-designated location we have, Maeve. The historical data indicated high structural integrity and proximity to resources necessary for self-sufficiency. It's a place we know we can settle, fortify, and begin repairs on the systems we need to survive long-term. It's where our resources can finally be put to use." "Systems," I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief. "You brought a crew of 90 academics and 20 rifles 700 miles for an educated guess? And you're not meeting anyone there?" "We are not meeting anyone," he confirmed, his voice grave. "The mission is a final attempt at establishing a self-sustaining habitat. We are entirely alone in this, Maeve. That's why we had to be so secretive in Mall City. If that location had been broadcast, it would have been a beacon for every desperate group for 1,000 miles. We have to be selfish. Our survival is entirely dependent on securing that site before anyone else can compromise it." I pressed, feeling the frustration mount. "And what about the trade route that failed? The scouting party that never returned? Who led it? And what were they looking for?" Erick sighed, running a tired hand over his neatly trimmed hair. The small sign of weariness was the most human thing he'd shown all day. "My brother Darian led that party. He was our best engineer, and the head of our council's strategic planning unit. He went to secure our path from territorial groups and to confirm the viability of the destination. He never returned. We have no confirmation of what happened or who he was negotiating with." "And Shanna?" I asked, watching his reaction closely. "Shanna was his wife," he replied, the information delivered with a painful finality. "She has assumed his role in the council. Her loyalty is to the mission my brother died trying to complete, a mission now entirely unsupported." The puzzle pieces clicked, confirming the terrible weight he carried. He wasn't just leading an expedition, he was carrying the last hope of his civilization, and he was alone. Yet, his instinct was still to obscure the full depth of his vulnerability. "We will proceed with caution," Erick stated, ending the conversation with the tone of a final verdict. He zipped up his pocket and walked away, leaving me to stare out at the endless white. The lack of honest answers was a heavy weight, fueling the quiet fury I felt toward him. He trusted me with his life and the lives of his people in the field, but he still wouldn't trust me with the full truth of their history or their objective. Our connection was a series of paradoxes, physically intimate, politically hostile, and strategically aligned. The weight of the secret. The miles continued to tick by, each one a testament to the group's grim endurance. Ellen was a quiet hero, her voice soft but firm, tending to the inevitable blistered feet and coughs. Jax and Tyler maintained a silent, almost predatory watch on the flanks. By the end of the day, we had covered 28 miles, a phenomenal distance. We stopped just as the setting sun turned the sky a violent, cold purple, making camp in the minimal shelter of a wide, shallow geological depression. That night, as the communal fire was reduced to glowing thermal tablets, I sought out Ellen, who was sitting with Jax near the children's carriers. "You're making good time, Maeve," Ellen said, handing me a small, steaming mug of legume broth. "It won't last," I replied, sipping the broth. "The terrain will get rougher. We're getting deeper into the old country." Jax, who had been silently sharpening her knife, looked up, her eyes keen. "The bunker people are talking about the rifles again. The peace is fragile, Maeve. They know their men have the guns, but they also know they need you to guide them. It's confusing their hierarchy. They'll have to get used to it," I said, my gaze sweeping the camp. "You need to rest," Ellen insisted, her maternal instinct impossible to turn off. "You haven't slept properly since we left Mall City. You're carrying the weight of all of us." "I'll take the first watch," I said, rising. "No, you won't," a voice cut in. It was Erick, his tone authoritative but subdued. "Tyler and I have the first 4 hours. You sleep." He was giving an order, an act of command that, despite the surface authority, felt like a residual tenderness. He was physically enforcing my self-care. I wanted to argue, to maintain the facade of my ceaseless vigilance, but the bone-deep weariness won. I simply nodded, turning toward my tent. Tyler and Jax exchanged knowing glances, the silent observers confirming the strange, tenuous bond that existed between the command pair. I went to my tent, the narrow space no longer feeling anonymous. It felt charged, a place of silent confrontation. I fell into my bag, pulling the hood tight. Sleep came quickly, a deep, restorative darkness that was finally free of the terror of the previous nights. The shared truth. I awoke hours later, disoriented. The thermal tablet was still flickering faintly. The zipper hissed open. I tensed, recognizing the familiar, fluid movement of the man who knew the sound of my breathing in the dark. Erick slipped inside. He didn't carry a weapon, only a small, soft, rolled-up blanket, an extra layer of insulation. He placed it carefully at the foot of my bag. "The temperature is dropping further," he whispered, his voice low and gravelly. "I just added some insulation to the sleds. I noticed you didn't pull the secondary lining over your bag." I stared at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I don't need a nurse, Erick. I need a co-commander. And a co-commander needs rest," he countered, the logic irritatingly sound. He knelt beside my bag, his proximity in the tiny tent suffocating. "You can't lead 111 people when you're running on fumes." "I'm fine," I snapped, but the word came out thin and tight. He reached out and, with gentle pressure, pushed my hood back from my face. His fingers brushed my cheek, the slight static electricity, a familiar jolt. "You're freezing," he murmured, contradicting my protest. "You need to trust me to watch the perimeter, Maeve. And you need to trust me with this." His lips found mine with a practiced familiarity that belied our self-imposed separation. This was slow, deliberate, and undeniably passionate. It was a silent admission, a break in the professional facade that we both desperately needed. The kiss deepened, his hands tangling in my hair, tilting my head back. I wrapped my arms around his neck, pulling him down, forgetting the map, the miles, the rifles, and the elusive truth he still kept hidden. In the tiny, insulated bubble of the tent, against the vast, silent cold of the white, he was the only thing that felt real and warm. It was a long, shared moment of surrender, a silent, furious pact made in the dark. When it ended, he rested his forehead against mine, his breath warm and uneven. "Go back to sleep, Commander," he whispered, the respect back in his voice. But the word now carried a layer of intimate irony. He retreated, zipping the tent with the same silent care. I lay there, trembling, my body flushed with heat, my mind in chaos. The lie was getting louder. The line between what was necessary for command and what was simply necessary for survival was blurring, tangled in the heat of a stolen kiss. I spent the next hour wide awake, listening to the crunch of his boots on the snow as he resumed his watch, wondering what kind of leader I was becoming and what kind of price I would pay for this dangerous, secret warmth. The sun eventually rose, painting the eastern horizon in hues of cold gold and pink. I packed my bag, my movements stiff. When I saw Erick by the sleds, directing the final loading, he met my gaze. I gave him a curt nod. He returned it. The night, and everything it held, was already buried beneath the fresh, clean sheet of the morning snow. We proceeded our journey, the sled runners singing their cold song across the hard-packed trail. We had survived the cold, the hunger, and the first major blizzard. Now, we had to survive the truth and the silence. The relentless trudge had become the new normal. For 5 more days, the column pushed westward, covering vast, desolate miles over the windswept plains and across the frozen backs of ancient, dead rivers. The temperature remained brutally low, but the sun, the pale, indifferent disk of the sun, was a predictable presence now, charting the long, grinding hours of labor. The silence between me and Erick was absolute and public, professional, and entirely focused on survival. Every morning, we reviewed the map, spoke only of mileage, fuel consumption, and watch schedules. The secret of the night was a silent, volatile charge between us, lending an unbearable tension to our proximity and sharpening the edge of my distrust. I knew the feel of his skin beneath the layers of wool and parka. I also knew he was still concealing the full truth about Penn Valley. My inner circle, Tyler, Jax, and Ellen, were the quiet observers of this strange command. Tyler remained fiercely loyal, Jax silently guarded my flanks, and Ellen tended the group's morale, her calm presence a necessary balm against the cold dread. It was on the 6th day after leaving the frozen city that the monotony broke. We were navigating through a series of low, rolling hills, the landscape dotted with the skeletal remains of pre-freeze radio towers. I noticed the signs first, subtle intrusions that an academic like Erick or a medic like Shanna would miss, but that a hunter and mall city runner like me understood immediately. Not tracks, not smoke, but a planned absence of tracks. The snow, perfectly packed and pristine everywhere else, showed specific, deliberate disturbance near the frozen creek beds, the kind of disturbance made by people trying to erase their path. Then, an hour later, I spotted a cairn, a small, crudely stacked pile of stones on a high ridge. It was a marker, an unnatural landmark, placed with purpose. I didn't stop the column. I didn't break stride. I didn't even turn around. I simply fell back slightly until Jax was walking beside me. "Jax," I murmured, my voice low and dry. "See anything?" She didn't look up, her eyes flicking across the terrain. Tracks were washed out by the wind hours ago, but the water access points, too clean. Someone's been pulling water and burying their waste, with specific intent. She paused, then tilted her head toward the high ridge. The rock stack. Not natural. Looks like a border mark. Human contact, I confirmed. The reality, a cold spike of adrenaline. We avoid it if we can. But we can't ignore it. I waited until the evening stop, after the tents were pitched, and the meal was underway. I called the core leadership, Erick, Shanna, Kyle, Tyler, Jax, and Ellen, into the main food tent. The rifles were placed outside, a necessary boundary. "We have company," I stated, spreading the map on the floor. Signs of human settlement. Organized, territorial, and trying to remain hidden. I pointed out the location of the cairn. They're west of us, probably a day's march. They're using the creek lines for water and hunting. They haven't found us yet, but they will. The news sent a nervous ripple through the group, particularly among the bunker elite. "We should proceed with caution and skirt their territory," Shanna suggested immediately, ever mindful of minimizing conflict. "We are an expedition, not a fighting force. Skirting them adds 3 days to our journey," I countered. 3 days we don't have, not with the fuel reserves dropping. My concern is that these are the people Darian's scouting party encountered. If they have a vested interest in the region, they will see us as invaders. "Then we utilize the rifles," Erick stated, his hand resting instinctively on his holster. "We make a show of force, bypass them swiftly, and minimize contact." "That's a good way to start a war we can't finish," Jax cut in, her quiet voice cutting through the tension. "If they're settled, they have scouts and traps. A direct confrontation is suicide." "Maeve, what's your assessment?" Ellen asked, her focus practical. "We need intelligence," I said, meeting Erick's gaze. The decision was already forming. We can't walk into the dark. We need to know their numbers, their disposition, and if they pose a threat to the Penn Valley route. "And the best way to get intelligence is to send a scout," Kyle finished, rubbing his hands together. "Exactly," I affirmed. "The scouting party will be minimal. 2 people. They need to be capable of stealth, tracking, and if necessary, diplomacy or escape." I looked at Tyler. "Tyler, you're essential here for leadership continuity." I looked at Jax. "Jax, you're essential for knowing the terrain and keeping the camp secured." I looked at the group. "It has to be me and Erick." The silence was thick, with shared implication. Me, the guide who knew the white. Erick, the leader who knew the enemy's potential mindset and carried the only truth about our destination. And there was the silent, dangerous intimacy between us. Shanna's mouth tightened. "That is an unacceptable risk to the command structure." "It's the only acceptable option," I stated, already gathering my pack. "We leave at midnight. We will be back by tomorrow evening. If we are not, the column proceeds west at first light, no matter what." The night was a black, crystalline cold. Erick and I moved away from the camp, leaving behind the safety of the perimeter. We traveled light, each carrying only a knife, a minimal thermal pack, and a pair of field glasses. Erick, despite my internal protest, carried one of the semi-automatic rifles slung across his back. "Don't use it unless you're dead," I instructed, my voice rough. "I won't," he promised. "We're going for stealth." We moved for 4 hours, navigating by starlight and the subtle shifts in the frozen terrain. The tension between us was an animal, straining at the leash, the knowledge of the night adding a confusing layer of intimacy to our mission. You're tracking well, Erick murmured, falling into step beside me as we crossed a patch of slick ice. It's easier when I'm not pulling a sled and arguing strategy, I retorted. I know, he replied, his tone low. I regret the secrecy, Maeve, but it's a habit born of necessity. The more eyes on the prize, the more likely it is to be compromised. And the more I think you're leading us into a trap, the harder I'll push back, I countered, looking him dead in the eye. If you ever compromise my life for your political goals again, the guns won't save you. He didn't look offended. He looked challenged. Noted. Now, I see heat distortion. He was right. Up ahead, nestled in a sheltered ravine, was a faint, hazy shimmer against the dark sky. We crawled forward on our bellies, the frozen ground biting through our clothes. The settlement was crude but efficient. A collection of salvaged metal shacks and tents clustered around a central fire pit, shielded from the wind by high rock walls. It was larger than I expected, at least 50 people. They were heavily cloaked in furs and scrap armor, moving with a rough, territorial confidence. Barbaric was the word that came to mind. Survival stripped down to its most vicious essentials. Look at their gear, Erick whispered, adjusting his field glasses. They're carrying scavenged axes, spears, and pre-freeze hunting rifles. Old military issue. They're armed, I confirmed. And they're settled. They've been here a while. Then I noticed the structure they had built over the fire. A large, rotating spit holding a whole, large animal. It was a quartered white wolf, but the processing was sloppy, the waste enormous. They weren't just hunters. They were consumers. We spent an hour observing the perimeter. They were heavily guarded, but their guard was sloppy, relying on the isolation of the white to deter intruders. They had dogs, and they had a tripwire system made of scavenged wire and broken glass. We know enough, I whispered. We know they're violent, territorial, and well-fed. We skirt them far to the south. Agreed, Erick said. We need to get out. He broke off. A low snarl erupted from the shadows just 10 feet away. One of their dogs, a massive, scarred beast, had silently flanked us. Before either of us could move, the dog lunged. Erick, with his military reflexes, reacted instantly, shoving me back into the snow. The dog's jaws snapped shut on the heavy fabric of his sleeve. Erick let out a sharp, controlled grunt of pain as he wrestled the animal, keeping the rifle out of the fight. The disturbance was enough. A gruff shout came from the settlement. Heavy footsteps approached. Move. We run, I hissed, scrambling to my feet. We ran, not toward the camp, but deeper into the canyon, hoping to use the terrain for cover. But the canyon was a trap. We were immediately met by 3 figures, heavy-set, armed with spears and knives, who had been patrolling the northern ridge. We were surrounded. Erick immediately dropped the rifle and raised his hands, a gesture of non-aggression. I followed his lead, my heart pounding with frustration. We had been caught like amateurs. The men, crude, fur-clad, and smelling strongly of smoke and unwashed pelts, were not diplomats. They barked orders in a heavily accented, guttural form of Old American. They stripped us of our gear, tying our hands roughly with leather thongs. They want to know what we're doing here, Erick murmured to me, his voice barely moving his lips. I told them we were lost, alone travelers. We need to maintain that story. They won't believe it, I muttered. My guide gear and his pristine bunker clothing were a stark contradiction to a lost traveler story. They dragged us back toward the camp, shoving us roughly. The whole settlement turned out to view the prisoners. The leader, a woman with a face scarred by frostbite and a massive axe strapped to her back, eyed Erick's expensive coat and my sturdy boots with unconcealed avarice. After a rough interrogation conducted mostly through snarls and threats, we were thrown into a makeshift cell, a small, dark, frigid metal shed that had been anchored to the ground. The door slammed shut, plunging us into absolute darkness. I immediately went to the wall, checking the structure. Metal, solid, anchored to a concrete slab. No windows. We have less than an hour before they start their evening patrol rotation, I stated, my voice low and urgent. And they're going to strip that rifle before morning. We move now. Agreed, Erick said, already working on the leather thongs binding his wrists. They tied us loosely, they're overconfident. The adrenaline burned away the last vestiges of our professional distance. We were back to raw, shared survival. What's the plan? He asked, rubbing his raw wrists. We don't go through the door. The only way out is down, I explained, running my hands along the edges of the shed. It's anchored to a concrete slab, but the metal floor is likely bolted down. We need to find the access panel, or the weakest point in the bolts. He crouched, feeling the metal floor with his fingertips. They stripped our knives, but they didn't search our feet. I glanced at him. The corner of his mouth twitched in a grim smile. He reached inside his heavy boot, pulling out a thin, flexible piece of bunker-grade titanium alloy, a makeshift lockpick and tool I hadn't known he possessed. Your secrets run deeper than the rifles, I said, a grudging admiration mixing with my old distrust. Survival is built on secrets, Maeve, he countered, already inserting the tool into the tiny space between the floor panel and the wall. I went to the door, listening to the activity outside. Shouts, laughter, and the distant sound of the dogs. We have maybe 20 minutes. Once we're out, we don't head back to the column. We track the rifle. We need that weapon. We go for the rifle, then out, then we flank south. Erick confirmed. He pressed the titanium pick against the bolt head. The metal groaned in protest. I crouched beside him, my shoulder pressed against his. The immediate physical tension was back. The proximity, the danger, the reliance on each other for life. This was the most honest place we had ever been. We were two animals in a trap, and our survival instinct was fused. Erick put all his weight into the tool. With a loud, sharp snap, the bolt finally sheared. We repeated the process for the second bolt. The metal panel was now loose. We lifted the panel, revealing a dark, frozen space beneath, the gap between the floor and the concrete slab. It was cold, small, and smelled of earth and old rust. "You first," he whispered. I didn't argue. I slipped into the dark hole, pulling the heavy metal door back over my head. I heard Erick follow, the scrape of his heavy clothing against the metal. We were in the crawl space, the sounds of the barbaric settlement muffled above us. We crawled forward in the darkness, side by side, moving toward the edge of the shed. "Where did they put the gear?" I asked, my breath catching in the icy air. "Near the fire pit." "They want to show it off," Erick replied. "They'll be cleaning the rifle now. We need to move fast." We reached the edge of the concrete slab. We had to dig through the frozen earth beneath the shed wall to emerge. It was slow, agonizing work, using only our hands. Finally, we broke through. And that marks the end of part 1 of The Cold Road. As Maeve and Erick race toward their fate, ask yourself, can two people so defined by their secrets ever truly trust each other? Who is the man behind the bunker's last hope? Who really is Erick? And what desperate purpose awaits them at Penn Valley? Is it a new civilization, or just the end of the line? Let me know your predictions in the comments below. If you're ready to find out if Maeve and Erick survive the road and their own dangerous passion, make sure to like this video and subscribe for part 2 of The Cold Road.